My name is Rachel Whitman, and at 36 years old, I never thought it would be my teenage daughter who opened my eyes to the truth I refused to see. That warm June evening at my parents' 45th anniversary party was supposed to be a joyful family milestone. The event hall overlooking Lake Michigan shimmered in soft candlelight, laughter echoed over string quartet music, and everyone seemed to be exactly where they belonged. Except my daughter, Lila. All through dinner, I noticed her fidgeting, her glances flickering between my parents and someone across the room, my ex-husband, Mark. When the waiters wheeled out the towering anniversary cake, Lila suddenly leaned in and whispered, "We need to leave." Now. I blinked. What? Why? Her gaze was cold and steady. I'll explain in the car. Before I take you deeper into what happened that night, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. If you've ever had to choose between family and self-respect, drop a comment. I'd love to hear your story too. I grew up in Milwaukee's upscale suburbs, where my parents, Gordon and Evelyn Whitman, were pillars of the community. Dad ran a respected architectural firm, and Mom curated charity events and holiday galas like they were Olympic sports. Our family photos looked perfect, but affection always came with strings attached. When I married Mark Barlow, my parents beamed. He was charismatic, ambitious, and, most importantly, the son of one of my father's golfing buddies. They welcomed him like royalty, praised his every move, and subtly reminded me that I had married well. What they didn't see, or chose to ignore, was the control beneath his charm. For years, I dismissed the red flags, the criticism disguised as jokes, the financial manipulation, the way he isolated me from friends. When I discovered his affair with a woman from his firm last fall, everything unraveled. Our divorce was drawn out and draining, and I was left raising our two kids, Lila, now 17, and my quiet 9-year-old son, Owen, while rebuilding my life from the ground up. I downsized from our Craftsman home into a cozy rental, picked up contract work as a copywriter, and leaned on a few loyal friends. Surprisingly, my parents rallied around me. Or so I thought. They invited us for brunches, helped with Owen's soccer gear, even offered to pay part of Lila's college prep program. I thought we were reconnecting. But Lila wasn't convinced. "They're pretending," she said one night. "They treat you like you're broken." I waved it off. "They're just adjusting, honey. Give them time." She gave me a look. "I have. But you're not the one they're rooting for." I didn't understand until that night at the anniversary party. When we pulled away from the venue and Lila finally spoke, her voice was calm but furious. "Mark's back with Grandma and Grandpa," she said. "They're helping him fight for full custody." My heart stopped. Everything they'd done, the kindness, the gifts, the invitations, wasn't for me. It was for him. Lila started skipping dinners at my parents' house, saying she had study groups or plans with friends. When she did come, she was distant, present, but not truly there. She would eat quietly, respond politely, and observe everything like a guest, not family. Owen, on the other hand, seemed to thrive under the attention. My parents took him to Brewers games, gifted him a new tablet for his birthday, and even arranged a weekend fishing trip at a private lodge. Dad started talking about Owen applying to his alma mater someday. "The Whitman legacy continues," he'd say, mussing Owen's hair with a rehearsed grin, avoiding my eyes like he didn't want to acknowledge the past year of struggle. When my parents announced their 45th anniversary celebration, I thought maybe, just maybe, it would bring us back together. They rented a ballroom at the Lakeside Pavilion in Sheboygan. Over 100 guests were invited. Family, former colleagues, neighbors from the lakefront community. I threw myself into helping. I couldn't afford anything new, so I let out the seams of a classic navy dress from my pre-divorce years. I designed the invitations myself, helped Mom finalize the caterer, and even put together a photo montage spanning their 4.5 decades. Lila watched me with concern. "Why do you keep giving so much to people who only give to Owen or Mark?" I smiled and said what I'd always been told, "Because that's what family does. We show up." The day of the party came with a perfect lake breeze and clear skies. I helped Lila get ready, convincing her to wear the forest green dress Grandma had mailed weeks earlier. Just a few hours, I promised. It'll make her happy. As we walked into the ballroom, my breath caught. White hydrangeas and soft candles filled the space. Classical music played while guests mingled in formal wear. My parents stood near the entrance like they owned the world. Dad looked sharp in his tux, and Mom wore a floor-length silver gown that shimmered with every movement. "Rachel, darling," Mom said, brushing my cheek with an air kiss. "You look comfortable. And Lila, don't you just glow in that dress? I knew it would suit you." Dad bypassed me entirely, scooping Owen into a big hug. "There's my champ. Got a VIP seat for you at the head table." That familiar pang tightened in my chest, but I forced a smile. It wasn't about me. This was their moment. I slipped into the rhythm of hosting, smiling at distant relatives, nodding at Dad's golf buddies, and deflecting questions about the divorce. "We're adjusting. The kids are strong. No, I'm not seeing anyone." Then I saw them, just stepping in through the main doors. Mark, in a tailored gray suit, and Sienna, arm in arm. And suddenly, everything clicked into place. Her blonde hair flowed in soft waves over a champagne-colored designer gown, elegant, expensive, and so far from anything in my closet. My stomach twisted. "Did you know they were coming?" I whispered to my sister-in-law, Michelle. She looked away, guilty. "I thought you did. Your mom invited them personally, sent the invitation herself." Before I could react, I saw my parents welcoming Mark and Sienna like VIP guests. My father gave Mark a hearty clap on the back, the kind reserved for old friends. My mother leaned in, complimenting Sienna's dress like they were lifelong shopping companions. I stood rooted, watching the man who'd betrayed me, and the woman who helped him do it, embraced like family. Then Mom caught my eye. She gave a dismissive smile and a soft shrug. "Bygones, Rachel. Mark's still part of the family. We couldn't exclude him from such a special night," she added, before moving on. Shaken, I slipped away to the bar for a glass of Merlot. Across the room, I spotted Lila near the fireplace, her thumbs flying across her phone. Her narrowed eyes were locked on the scene I had just escaped. I should have asked what she was texting. I should have noticed the way her jaw tightened. Instead, I took another sip of wine and whispered to myself, "Just make it through this night with grace." The lakeside ballroom buzzed with conversation and soft jazz from the quartet. Servers passed by with trays of crab cakes and stuffed mushrooms. Cameras flashed as the photographer coaxed staged laughter from stiff-shouldered guests. Meanwhile, Mark and Sienna glided through the crowd, receiving well wishes on their recent engagement. "You're handling this with so much grace," my cousin Natalie murmured as she passed, her hand squeezing my elbow. "I'd be in jail if I were you." "I'm trying," I replied, forcing a smile. "For the kids." Owen was easy to find. He stood beside my father, practically glowing as Dad introduced him to one investor after another. "This one's headed for the Ivy Leagues," Dad announced, resting a proud hand on Owen's shoulder. The next generation of Whitman leadership. Lila, however, had vanished from her spot. I finally found her near the far wall, in hushed conversation with Aunt Janice, my mother's younger sister. Lila stood with arms folded, her expression fierce and unrelenting. Janice kept glancing around the room, visibly tense. As I approached, both of them straightened quickly. "Everything all right?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just catching up with my favorite grandniece," Janice said too brightly. Lila met my eyes without flinching. "We were talking about family," she said coolly. "How it works. Who gets protected?" Before I could ask more, the gentle chime of a spoon against crystal rang out across the ballroom. A toast was about to begin. Everyone turned toward the podium, while my daughter stayed locked in place, watching me like she knew something I didn't. My father stood at the center of the ballroom, commanding the space like a seasoned orator. "Evelyn and I are truly grateful for your presence here tonight," he began, lifting his glass toward my mother. 45 years ago, I made the smartest long-term investment of my life." Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. "Marriage," he continued, "isn't just about love. It's about building something that lasts, about making difficult decisions when necessary, always with the family's future in mind." His eyes flicked to Mark, then settled on Owen. And then, briefly, on me. with an expression I couldn't quite place. It wasn't warmth. It wasn't pride. Tonight, we don't just celebrate the past. We fortify the future, to legacy, and to wise decisions. Glasses clinked all around, though a few guests shared puzzled glances at the oddly corporate tone of the toast. As dinner began, I tried to focus on the meal: salmon fillet in lemon beurre blanc, roasted asparagus, garlic mashed potatoes. But my stomach was tight with unease. Lila barely touched her plate, glancing down at her phone every few minutes. Across the room, Owen had been relocated to sit between my father and Mark, both of whom were locked in animated conversation that trailed off every time I neared. By dessert, I excused myself for a breather and headed toward the restroom. I nearly bumped into Aunt Janice in the hallway. "Oh, Rachel," she said, startled. "I was hoping to find you alone." "Everything okay? You looked pretty serious talking to Lila earlier." Janice looked over her shoulder before lowering her voice. "I overheard some things I thought you should know. Your father and Mark, they've been discussing some financial dealings that don't sit right with me." I froze. "What kind of dealings? Property transfers? Legal maneuvering? They mentioned your name? And words like unstable and a liability. Rachel, I've known your dad a long time. He's always been controlling, but this feels calculated." A chill ran through me. "Do you know what they're planning?" She gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "I'm not sure, but please, be careful." Before I could ask more, my mother's voice rang down the hall. "Janice, come on, the photographer's waiting for the sisters' photo." With an apologetic smile, Janice hurried off, leaving me standing there with a knot of dread in my stomach. Back at the table, I saw Owen now perched on Mark's lap, giggling as they looked at something on his phone. My mother stood beside them, glowing with approval, the kind she rarely gave me. "Where's Lila?" I asked, scanning the room. "That girl," my mother sighed, waving a dismissive hand, "said something about fresh air. So dramatic lately." I found Lila on the terrace, her back to the ballroom, phone pressed tightly to her ear. Her voice was low, urgent. "Yes, that's what the document said. I just need to know if it's legal." She spotted me and quickly ended the call, her jaw set with determination. Something was unraveling, and my daughter was already steps ahead. "Mom, how's the party?" Lila asked, slipping her phone into her purse. "Who were you talking to?" "Just a friend," I said carefully, still rattled. She didn't push, just nodded. "Have you noticed how much time Grandpa's spending with Mark tonight?" "It's probably business talk," I offered, though the words tasted like ash. Lila studied my face, then asked quietly, "Have you ever wondered why Grandpa keeps all those family documents in his office? The property deeds? The trust paperwork?" I narrowed my eyes. "What are you talking about? How would you even know what's in Dad's office?" She hesitated. "Last time we visited, I needed a quiet place to study. Grandma said I could use his office since he was out golfing." Her expression was solemn now. "There were papers on his desk, with your name and Mark's, stuff flagged in red, legal stuff." I saw the words asset transfer and custody. A chill swept over me, despite the balmy June air. "Lila," I said softly, "those are private documents. You shouldn't have been snooping." She didn't flinch. "Even if they're about you? About us?" Her voice tightened. "Why aren't you more alarmed?" Before I could answer, the terrace doors opened. Waitstaff began ushering guests back inside for the cake cutting. Lila leaned closer. "Just watch them. Really watch. Especially how they treat Mark." And I did. For the next hour, I noticed everything I had been trying to ignore. My father guiding Mark to key guests with his hand firmly on his shoulder. My mother bringing out a vintage heirloom necklace to show Owen, one she had once promised to pass on to Lila. Mark, grinning like he belonged, like he had never left. Most disturbing was the positioning during photos. My father, Mark, and Owen at the center, framed perfectly, with me off to the side or cut out altogether. A tidy image of legacy, of who they believed still carried the family line. Then came the slideshow presentation. 45 years of love and legacy. The title slide read in cursive as the lights dimmed. Images cycled through. Weddings, vacations, holiday portraits. Brian, my brother, and his wife featured prominently. So did Mark. So did Owen. But me? Barely a mention. Lila appeared in just 2 photos, both group shots at Christmas. It was like someone had quietly redrafted the family story without us. As the applause faded and the lights rose, my father took the mic again. He stood tall, voice booming. "Before we cut the cake, Evelyn and I have an exciting announcement," he declared, beaming. I sat frozen, heart thudding. Lila, beside me, already knew. She didn't look at the stage. She looked at me. She had seen it coming. And now, so had I. He raised his glass and gestured for Mark and Owen to join him on stage. "Family continuity has always been our guiding principle," my father announced proudly. "And tonight, we're taking steps to ensure the Whitman legacy, our values, our properties, our name, remain in capable hands for generations to come." Beside me, Lila slipped her hand into mine and squeezed hard. "In the coming weeks," my father continued, "we'll be finalizing arrangements that will secure our family's future through the appropriate legal channels." His eyes flicked toward mine with something that wasn't quite remorse. Maybe pity. Maybe warning. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "the most loving thing you can do is make difficult decisions on behalf of those who may not fully understand what's best." A ripple of polite confusion moved through the guests. Lila suddenly stood. "I need to check something," she whispered before slipping away. I barely had time to reach for her. For the next 20 minutes, I sat frozen in place, murmuring polite thanks as guests came by to offer compliments and congratulations. I nodded, smiled, pretended I wasn't unraveling. When Lila returned, her face was pale and her eyes steeled with resolve. She leaned in close, her voice a whisper but sharp with urgency. "Mom, we need to leave. Right now." "We can't just leave," I whispered back. "It's your grandparents' anniversary. Owen's having fun." Lila shook her head, her gaze darting toward the far side of the room. "This isn't about Owen having fun. Just trust me. Please." "Did something happen? Are you sick?" "I'll explain everything," she said, her voice tight. "But not here." I followed her line of sight and saw Gerald Sloan, Dad's longtime business partner, watching us closely from across the room. "Mom, for once," Lila said, her voice cracking, "can you just trust me without 1,000 questions?" Lila wasn't the dramatic type. She'd always been grounded and intuitive, more observant than I gave her credit for. The urgency in her tone cut through my hesitation. "Okay," I nodded. "Let me say goodbye and get Owen." "Make it quick," she warned, "and don't let Grandpa talk you into staying." As I made my way toward Owen, who was laughing with his cousins near the cake table, I could feel curious eyes following me. Halfway there, my mother appeared, blocking my path. "Leaving already?" she asked, her red lipstick smile polite but firm. "The night's just getting interesting." "Lila's not feeling well," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "We should get her home." "Send her with Brian," she said, waving a hand. "He'll take her. You and Owen should stay for the announcements." I paused, her insistence landing heavy in my chest. "What announcements?" "Just some family business," she said breezily. "Nothing for you to worry about." But her tone betrayed her, and I realized then, this night wasn't just about celebrating the past. It was about rewriting the future. Without me. She patted my arm with that familiar, polished condescension. "Your father has everything under control." "That's exactly what concerns me," I replied, stepping past her to find Owen. He frowned when I took his hand. "But Grandpa said he has a special surprise for me later." "We'll come back another day for the surprise," I promised, my voice gentle but firm, keeping my eyes from drifting toward my father's watchful gaze across the room. Just as we reached the exit, Mark stepped in front of us. His sudden presence, his familiar cologne, it all hit like a wave I didn't ask for. "Heading out already?" he said casually. "The night's still young, Rachel." He leaned closer. "Your father wanted to talk about arrangements for Owen's education fund." "Another time," I said tightly, noting how he had mentioned only Owen. Not a word about Lila. Mark lowered his voice. "Don't be stubborn. This is about securing Owen's future. Your parents are stepping in because, let's be honest, you've been struggling. It's not like you're in a position to fully support both kids. His eyes flicked over my simple dress like a silent judgment. Before I could speak, Lila stepped forward, her voice cool and unwavering. We're leaving. Now, Owen, take Mom's hand. Without waiting for a reply, she moved between us like a shield. As we pushed toward the doors, I caught voices from a small group of Dad's legal team chatting nearby. Transfer of deeds should go through smoothly once the custody modification is in place. The Whitman legacy stays intact, even if not through the daughter. Mark's name on the trust before the end of the month. The words hit like a punch. Dad intercepted us near the exit, his expression carefully crafted. Part concern, part performance. Rachel, this is completely inappropriate. We have guests. Important announcements. I'm sorry, I said, steadying my voice. Lila isn't feeling well. He barely glanced at her. Then leave her with the event staff. You and Owen should stay for the family business portion of the evening. The way he emphasized family business, while intentionally excluding Lila, sent a fresh surge of alarm through me. For the first time in my life, I didn't defer. No, I said simply. Whatever it is, it can wait. We're leaving. His jaw tightened. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior that worries us. Mark wouldn't let personal feelings interfere with family obligations. I couldn't hold back. Mark let his personal feelings interfere plenty with his assistant. And yet, somehow, he's still the favorite. Dad leaned in, voice low. We're trying to protect the family's assets from your emotional decisions. If you'd stop being so difficult and accept the arrangement, this could all be painless. I stiffened. What arrangement? I demanded, my voice rising now. He hesitated, and in that hesitation, I realized whatever they had planned, it was already in motion, and I was never meant to be part of it. He straightened, smoothing his expression just as another guest approached. We'll talk when you're ready to be reasonable, he said calmly. Mark and I have plans in place, plans that benefit everyone, especially Owen. Lila tugged my sleeve. Mom, no, please. I looked down into my daughter's eyes. What I saw there wasn't just defiance, it was fear, laced with certainty. Whatever she had uncovered had shaken her to the core. That was enough for me. Without another word to my father, I turned and walked away, guiding both my children through the tall, polished doors of the lakeside pavilion and into the warm hush of a Wisconsin summer night. We moved quickly across the lot to my old Honda Accord, the only car that didn't sparkle under the valet lights. As I pulled away from the circular drive, I felt an unexpected mix of dread and clarity. Something inside my family was broken, deeply, and for the first time, I wasn't going to ignore it. The car was silent except for Owen's occasional yawns in the back seat as he fidgeted with the glow wand from the party. Lila sat upright and rigid, hands clenched in her lap, eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. I finally spoke. Are you going to tell me what this is really about? She glanced at Owen, then whispered, Not yet. He shouldn't hear this. I nodded, trusting her instinct. We drove in tense quiet for nearly 15 minutes until Owen's head slumped to the side, his quiet breathing soft and rhythmic. He had finally given in to exhaustion. Lila turned toward me. Pull over. I need to show you something. I pulled into the empty lot of a shuttered shopping center, parked under a flickering light, and turned off the engine. The interior filled with stillness as the dome light cast a glow across her face. She unlocked her phone and spoke low. I've suspected for months. The way Grandpa and Grandma talk about you when you're not around. How they dote on Owen but barely acknowledge me. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but today confirmed it. She opened her messages and scrolled. Before I show you anything, I need to tell you who I've been talking to. She hesitated, then met my eyes. Aunt Samantha. The name hit like a punch. My father's youngest sister, cut off from the family 15 years ago after a brutal fallout over her share of their parents' estate. He'd always insisted she was unstable, greedy, vindictive. We hadn't heard from her in over a decade. Lila, how did you even reach her? I found her on Instagram 3 months ago, she said. I messaged her because... Her voice trailed off as she looked down at her phone. Then she met my eyes again. Because I needed to know if what I was seeing was real, And she told me, "It is. Because the way Grandpa treats you," Lila whispered, reminded me of the stories Aunt Samantha told me. The way he controlled her life, until she finally broke free. She handed me her phone, the screen glowing with a long string of messages. I scrolled slowly, reading Samantha's detailed warnings. Watch for signs, she'd written. Increased control over your finances. Sudden interest in custody. Strategic flattery mixed with guilt. Lila had replied with growing concern. The tone of her messages shifted over time, from suspicion to certainty. My heart clenched as I read. "That's why I've been paying attention," Lila said, her voice tight. But today confirmed it. She took a breath. "When I left the party, I went to Grandpa's private office upstairs. I heard Mark and him talking earlier about documents in a locked briefcase. I needed to know what they were hiding." "Lila," I sighed, "you can't just go through someone's things." "I know," she interrupted, "but I had to, and I'm glad I did." "Mom, they're planning to take everything from you." Her eyes filled with tears. "When I was looking for the restroom, I overheard Grandpa and Mark laughing. They said you'd never see it coming. That was the moment I decided. I had to look." She opened her photo gallery and began swiping. "I took pictures. All of it." My hands trembled as she passed me the phone again. There they were, scans of legal documents, clear and damning. My name, Mark's name, my parents' signatures, property transfer forms for the Victorian house on Hawthorne Avenue, the one they'd always said would be mine someday. Custody petitions, too, with handwritten notes from my father about Owen's proper upbringing under stable family guidance. Lila's voice lowered. "There's more." She scrolled again and tapped a recording file. "I kept my phone in my pocket at the party," she said. "Mic on." A quiet murmur turned clear. "Mark understands what it takes to maintain the Whitman legacy," my father's voice echoed. "Rachel's always been too sensitive. This divorce gives us a chance to protect our assets." Then Mark, "With the house in my name, as Owen's primary guardian, we can maintain stability." Another voice, my mother's, joined. "We've always worried about Rachel's judgment. That art school phase. The teacher she dated. Thank God Mark stayed close despite everything. He's still the son we always wanted." I stared at the dashboard, eyes stinging. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a carefully orchestrated plan. One I never saw coming. Lila gently took back her phone. "We have to fight this, Mom." And for the first time that night, I didn't feel alone. I felt fury and clarity. The Whitmans wanted to erase me, but I was done playing the quiet daughter. If this moment hit you like it hit me, if you've ever felt erased by the very people meant to protect you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happened next. Because this story is far from over. Contesting the divorce settlement, building a case for increased custody of Owen, transferring assets, and quietly erasing Lila from the picture altogether because she was too much like me, always asking questions, never blindly obedient. "They've been telling Owen things too," Lila said softly. My heart sank. "What kind of things?" "Little comments when you're not around. Grandma told him that if he lived with Dad, he could go to special schools, travel more, have opportunities you can't afford. She said you're holding him back." It hit like a punch to the chest. My own parents, plotting with Mark at their anniversary celebration. While I made photo collages and poured their wine, they were planning to take my son, to steal the house they once promised me, to cut me out like I never mattered. "I couldn't let you stay while they announced everything," Lila said. "Aunt Samantha told me Grandpa did the same thing to her, used a family event to humiliate her. She couldn't react without looking unstable." I reached for her hand and held it tightly. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Thank you for paying attention when I refused to see, for being brave enough to investigate, for getting us out." Lila blinked back emotion. "I was scared you wouldn't believe me. You always want to think the best of them." I nodded. "I believe you now." With trembling hands, I turned the key and started the engine. "Let's go home. We'll figure out what to do next." As we drove back through Sheboygan's quiet streets toward our two-bedroom apartment, two things became unmistakably clear. My daughter had saved me from my own blind faith, and tomorrow I would begin a war I never imagined I'd fight. Sleep never came that night. After tucking Owen into bed, I sat with Lila at our worn kitchen table. We combed through everything: photos, texts, recordings. We backed up the files, double-checked timestamps, read every note Aunt Samantha had sent. Just after midnight, Lila finally drifted off on the couch, her phone still clutched in her hand. I covered her with a blanket and sat in the dim light of the kitchen, marveling at her strength and mourning what we'd lost. Alone, I opened my old laptop. There was one more thing I had to check: an email account I used to share with Mark. I hadn't touched it in years, but I still remembered the password. He'd always assumed I'd forgotten. I logged in, and in the drafts folder, where he often saved messages he never sent, I found them. Richard agrees transfer should be finalized before fall semester, custody paperwork to follow. Another entry, dated just 3 days ago. Anniversary party perfect cover to present new arrangements. Rachel distracted. Doubt she'll react until it's done. My breath caught. They weren't just scheming. They were already in motion, and they had no idea what was coming next. Evelyn's worried about Rachel's reaction, but Gordon's confident the pressure from family will force her to comply. The words blurred on the screen as my hand shook, scrolling through Mark's unsent emails. Each sentence was another knife. In the sent folder, I found messages addressed to our family attorney, requests to begin modifying custody and child support agreements. The reasoning? Changes in household stability and parental income. It was just past 2 a.m., and exhaustion mixed with adrenaline had overtaken me. In a moment of impulse and clarity, I did something I hadn't done in over 15 years. I searched for Samantha Whitman online. Her business website came up first. She now ran a private design firm in Minneapolis. My fingers hovered for only a second before I sent the message. Samantha, this is Rachel. Lila showed me everything. I need to talk about Dad. Her response came in less than a minute. I've been waiting for this for years. Are you safe to talk? We spoke for over an hour. Her story poured out. How our father had manipulated her out of her rightful share of our grandparents' estate. How, at a family event not unlike tonight's, he announced changes to the family trust that had already been executed behind her back. When she objected, he painted her as unstable and greedy. People believed him. History repeats itself, she said quietly. Your father runs the family like a corporation. The children? We're just assets. When I married someone outside his country club circle, I stopped being useful. He managed me out. I felt the sting of truth. Why didn't you ever tell me? I tried, she said, her voice soft. But you were in college, idolizing him, planning your wedding to Mark, his golden boy. You didn't want to hear it. The memory pierced me. How I'd brushed off Samantha's concerns, believed the family narrative without a second thought. I'm sorry, I whispered. I should have listened. What matters is that you're listening now, she replied gently. And that you have Lila. That girl is extraordinary, smart, loyal, and brave. Her voice caught. When she reached out, I saw myself in her. Before Dad broke me. Before we ended the call, Samantha gave me her attorney's contact info and firm advice. Document everything. Don't confront them alone. And whatever you do, don't sign a thing. As the sun crept over Lake Michigan, I made one more call, to my brother Brian. He lived in Oregon and had always stayed on the edge of family drama, but I needed to know. To my surprise, he didn't deny it. I've overheard Dad and Mark talking about transferring the house, about Owen. You didn't think I deserved to know? I asked, voice brittle. He was quiet for a beat too long. Dad made it sound like tax stuff, he finally said. Said it was better for everyone. Everyone? I echoed. His silence was all the answer I needed. Why, Brian? I asked quietly, though my voice trembled. Why would they do this to me? He sighed heavily on the other end of the line. Dad never forgave you for choosing art over business. Then during the divorce, when you started questioning Mark's financial decisions, you became a threat. In his mind, you put family wealth at risk. I swallowed hard. Mark promised Dad he'd keep everything in the bloodline through Owen, Brian continued. And Lila? She's too independent. Too much like you. Like I used to be, I finished for him, before I learned to keep my head down and stop asking questions. Brian didn't answer. I'm sorry, Rachel. I should have told you sooner. The next morning, after I made Owen breakfast and sent him across the hall to play with Jacob from 2B, I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand. Lila sat beside me, her quiet presence giving me strength. I dialed my parents' number. My mother answered. Her voice was clipped and frosty. Rachel, your behavior last night was completely unacceptable. Your father is extremely disappointed. Put Dad on the line, I said firmly. I want to speak with both of you. A moment later, his voice joined hers. Sharp, authoritative, and impatient. I assume you're calling to apologize for that little performance at the party? No, I said. I'm calling about the documents, the property transfers, the custody modifications, the trust restructuring. There was a pause, a telling one. That's private family business, my father finally replied, his voice hardening, and wouldn't concern you if you had shown better judgment in your personal life. It does concern me. It involves my children, and the house you promised would be mine. An inheritance is a privilege, not a right, my mother snapped. Your father built everything we have. He's simply deciding where it's best allocated. To Mark? I asked, fury rising. To the man who cheated on me and tried to undermine me during our divorce? Don't be dramatic, my father replied coldly. We're ensuring the family legacy is managed wisely. You've made questionable financial decisions. Since the divorce, you've taken unnecessary risks. You mean refusing to let Mark control all our accounts? Or choosing to keep my gallery job instead of playing the trophy wife? We've always supported your little hobby, my mother said, her tone dripping with condescension. Mark understands business, my father cut in. He knows how to protect what matters. Owen deserves every opportunity that comes with proper stewardship. And Lila? I asked. What opportunities have you mapped out for her? Their silence was deafening. Finally, my mother spoke. Lila is headstrong, like Samantha, not particularly interested in tradition. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Well, let me make this perfectly clear, I said, my voice icy but unwavering. I know everything about your plans, and I'm not staying silent anymore. I have copies of the documents, I said, my voice steady. Recordings of your conversations with Mark, and I have witnesses. Proof that you manipulated Owen, lied to him about me. You're being hysterical, my father snapped. This is exactly why we had to take measures. Your emotional instability, is that how you justified what you did to Aunt Samantha, too? I cut in. The silence that followed was sharp, crackling with tension. I knew then I'd struck a nerve. I've spoken with Samantha, I continued, and Brian. I know this isn't the first time you've pushed family members out of their inheritance, or used public family events to force compliance and silence dissent. You've been talking to Samantha? My mother gasped. That ungrateful, unstable. That's enough, I said coldly. I'm meeting with an attorney tomorrow. Any future communication goes through them, and you can tell Mark the same. My father's tone darkened. You're making a serious mistake. We were trying to help you. No, Dad, I replied. You were trying to control me, like you always have. But it ends here. I hung up the phone. Lila sat beside me, her expression a swirl of pride and uncertainty. What happens now? She asked quietly. I wrapped her in a hug, feeling her bravery settle into my bones. Now, I whispered, we fight. Not just for what's ours, but to finally be free of them. In that moment, something broke loose inside me. Decades of seeking approval, of staying quiet, finally gave way to something else. Not anger, clarity. My children and our dignity came first now. Nothing else mattered. The next morning, I called Jennifer Reeves, the attorney Samantha had recommended. Unlike the polished legal firms tied to my father's social world, Jennifer's office was unassuming. A converted second-floor suite above a bakery in downtown Sheboygan. But her eyes were sharp, her handshake firm, and her voice carried zero tolerance for manipulation. After reviewing Lila's evidence and the documents I'd printed from Mark's old email account, Jennifer leaned back. This isn't uncommon, she said calmly. Wealthy patriarchs often use property and trust arrangements as control mechanisms. But the good news is, your daughter's documentation gives us real leverage. What about the custody threats? I asked, that familiar fear tightening in my chest. Mark has money, and now he has my parents backing him. Money matters, Jennifer acknowledged, but courts care more about stability and emotional well-being. These recordings, she tapped Lila's phone, paint a picture of emotional manipulation and strategic alienation. That works in our favor. She laid out the plan. Immediate legal notices to freeze any property transfers without my signature, formal affidavits documenting attempts to weaponize custody for financial control, and interviews with both children, especially Lila, given her age and clarity. We'll also need to address your son, she said gently. Owen's already being influenced. The sooner we intervene, the better. And I knew right then, this battle wouldn't be easy. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared. I was ready. From everything you've described, Jennifer said, folding her hands, it's clear they've been conditioning Owen to favor his father and grandparents through gifts, promises, and strategic influence. Lila, seated beside me, leaned forward. Owen's confused, she said firmly. He loves Mom, but Grandpa keeps telling him that living with Dad would mean a bigger bedroom, a private school, and trips to Disney. He doesn't understand he's being manipulated. Jennifer nodded. Children are perceptive, but they're still vulnerable, especially when the manipulation is subtle. Family therapy might help Owen process all this in age-appropriate ways. After securing initial legal protections with Jennifer's help, including notices to freeze any property transactions involving the house, I knew the next step wouldn't be legal. It would be personal. At Jennifer's advice, I arranged to meet Mark at a local cafe. Neutral ground, public. I placed my phone on the table, screen visible, voice recorder already running. He arrived late, as usual, and dropped into the chair with practiced casualness. "This is unnecessary," he muttered, eyeing the phone. "We could have handled this privately." "Family matters became legal matters," I said calmly, "the moment you conspired with my parents behind my back." His eyes flickered. "You're overreacting. Misunderstandings. Exaggerations." I kept my tone steady, just like Jennifer had coached. "We both know that's not true. I've seen the documents, the emails, the property drafts, and Lila recorded your conversation with Gordon at the party." His confidence wavered. "They came to me," he admitted eventually, his voice dropping. "Your parents. They were concerned about your emotional state. After the divorce, they worried about the kids' stability. And the solution," I replied, "was transferring my inheritance to you, modifying custody, cutting out Lila." He looked down, embarrassed for the first time. "Gordon believes family assets should be preserved, managed correctly. And because I left you after your affair," I said, "I'm now unfit to manage anything. Not the house, not my own children." Mark leaned forward, voice smooth, persuasive, familiar. "Rachel, come on, be reasonable. Your dad's offering financial security. For Owen, for his future, you just have to cooperate." "And Lila?" I asked quietly. His pause said everything. "She's different, strong-willed, like you." Translation. "Not controllable," I finished. Mark sighed, pushing back his chair. "You don't want to make this ugly, Rachel. Your parents have resources, connections. Don't start a war you can't win." He left without another word. Once, that would have terrified me. But I wasn't the same woman who stood quietly beside him at my parents' dinner parties. Lila had reminded me who I used to be, and who I could still become. The next few weeks were a blur of strategic filings and emotional repair. Jennifer submitted formal motions protecting my parental rights and legally blocking any property transfers initiated without my consent. And for the first time in years, I no longer felt outnumbered. I felt prepared. I scheduled sessions with a family therapist who specialized in parental manipulation and emotional triangulation. I brought both Lila and Owen to help create a space where Owen could begin to unpack his confusion safely and without judgment. Grandpa says Dad needs me more than you do, Owen confessed during our second session, his small voice filled with uncertainty, his 8-year-old face crinkled with worry. He says I'm the Whitman heir. I swallowed the sting of those words and gently replied, "You're my son first, sweetheart. You don't have to carry adult worries, and you never have to choose between the people who love you." Lila thrived during this new era of openness. She no longer had to carry the weight of protecting me from truths I had been unwilling to face. She stayed in close touch with Samantha, who became a steady source of support and strategy. But the most unexpected healing came from my reconnection with Samantha herself. After 15 years of silence, crafted and sustained by my father, we slowly rebuilt our relationship through long calls and weekend visits. She now ran a successful interior design firm in Boulder, Colorado, had married a soft-spoken literature professor, and raised 2 bright, artistic kids I was just beginning to know. "Dad runs the same play every time," Samantha said during her first visit to our apartment. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, sipping tea. "He targets the one person who questions him, labels them unstable, cuts them off from everyone else, then announces decisions at some big family event when it's too late for the target to fight back without looking emotional." I stared at her, stunned. How did I not see it? "Because he only targets one person at a time," she replied gently. "The rest stay quiet, afraid they're next." She reached for my hand and squeezed it. But he miscalculated this time. He didn't expect Lila. And she was right. Lila had become my fiercest protector. While I juggled court filings, therapy, and long nights of doubt, she kept a meticulous journal of every call, every comment, every manipulation. She built timelines. She gathered receipts. She even helped explain the chaos to Owen in ways he could understand. "Mom's not taking you away from Dad or Grandpa," I overheard her telling him. "She's just making sure everyone plays fair, like when you and Jaden agree on game rules, so no one cheats." Even Brian, our always neutral brother, eventually took a quiet stand. He didn't join us in person. He wasn't ready for open confrontation, but he sent a cache of emails, statements, and financial documents that added weight to our case. Silent support, but invaluable. The hardest part wasn't legal. It was emotional. Letting go of the idea that my parents would ever be the people I had tried so long to believe they were. 3 months after that explosive anniversary party, Jennifer called. "Mark wants to meet," she said. "No lawyers, no parents, just you and him." She paused. "He's feeling the pressure. Your father's plans are stalled thanks to our filings," Jennifer had told me the day before. "And from what I've heard, Mark's fiancé isn't thrilled about being dragged into a custody battle that's gaining attention." So, when Mark requested another meeting, I agreed. Again, at a public cafe in downtown Sheboygan, with Lila nearby for support. This time, he arrived without his usual swagger. "This is getting out of hand," he began, avoiding eye contact. "The lawyers, the court filings. It's affecting Owen. It's affecting your wedding plans," Lila muttered from her spot by the window. Mark shot her a sharp look but didn't deny it. "I'm willing to back away from your father's property arrangements," he said slowly, "and keep the original custody terms, if you agree to withdraw the parental manipulation claims." I studied him, the man I had once married, the man I had trusted with my future, and the father of my children, now revealed as someone willing to use our son for leverage. "Why the change of heart?" I asked. He glanced away. "Emily thinks the situation looks bad. Her parents are asking questions. They're uncomfortable with how things look." Translation: his new in-laws had expectations, and Mark's behavior wasn't meeting them. "I'll consider it," I replied, "but I want everything in writing, and any agreement must include equal protection for both Lila's and Owen's inheritance rights." As we went back and forth, I realized something had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet wife tiptoeing around Mark's ego. I was his equal, and I was holding the pen. Later that week, we scheduled a therapy session with Owen. With guidance, Mark and I explained we had resolved our differences and would continue co-parenting without making Owen choose sides. "Does that mean Grandpa won't be mad at Mom anymore?" Owen asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt the breath catch in my throat. "Your grandparents and I don't always agree," I said gently, "but none of that changes how much we all love you." It wasn't the full truth, but it was enough for now. 6 months after the anniversary party, the reckoning finally came. Jennifer arranged for all parties to gather in her office conference room. A year ago, I never could have imagined it. My parents, stiff and stone-faced across the table. Mark beside them, cautious but clearly distancing himself. Samantha beside me, calm and unshaken. And Lila, composed, focused, sat confidently at the head of the table. She placed her evidence folders on the table, methodically arranged. Jennifer stood to open the session when my father suddenly spoke. "Before we begin," Gordon Whitman said, his tone as cold and commanding as ever, "I want to formally object to Samantha's presence. This is a family matter." Without missing a beat, I replied, "Exactly. That's why she belongs here." And this time, I didn't flinch. "Samantha is family," I said simply, "and her experience with your financial manipulation is directly relevant to what we're addressing today." My mother let out a soft sigh, dabbing at non-existent tears with a monogrammed handkerchief. "I don't understand how it came to this," she murmured. "We only wanted what was best for Owen, and for the Whitman legacy." "By excluding Lila?" I challenged. "By stealing my inheritance and turning my son against me?" "We never—" my mother began defensively, but Jennifer cut in smoothly, placing a folder on the table. "Perhaps we should review the documented conversations before continuing with denials," she said, her tone neutral but firm. What followed was a calm, unshakable presentation of everything we had gathered. Lila's recordings, the emails between Gordon and Mark, the property documents drafted behind my back, and statements from Brian confirming internal family discussions I was never meant to hear. But most damning of all were the audio clips. Gordon and Evelyn openly discussing how to shape Owen's preferences with bribes and guilt, promises of a better life if he chose his father, remarks about my so-called emotional instability and financial incompetence. As Jennifer outlined the legal consequences, potential civil claims for attempted parental alienation, fiduciary breaches as trustee, my father's jaw tightened. His polished demeanor cracked, inch by inch. Finally, he spoke. "What exactly do you want?" he asked, voice flat. Jennifer didn't hesitate. She slid a clean set of documents across the table. "Ms. Whitman's terms are clear," she said. "First, a binding agreement reaffirming Rachel's legal right to the properties previously designated to her in the family trust. Full and sole control." My father opened his mouth to object, but his attorney quietly placed a hand on his arm. He stayed silent. "Second, an updated trust structure, naming both Lila and Owen as equal beneficiaries, with neutral third-party trustees replacing Mr. Whitman." My mother gasped softly. Shock, insult, or both. She looked at Gordon, who refused to meet her eyes. "Third, a structured grandparent visitation schedule, professionally supervised, until trust is re-established." "This is outrageous," my father snapped. "We don't need supervision to see our own grandchildren." Jennifer remained composed. "The recordings show deliberate efforts to undermine Ms. Whitman's parenting. That undermines your claim to unsupervised access." The negotiations stretched into the late afternoon, tense, exhausting, but deliberate. Eventually, with clenched jaws and bitter silence, the agreement was signed. My inheritance secured. Equal protection for both children. Boundaries drawn around my parents at last. As we gathered our things, my father couldn't resist one final parting shot. "I hope you're satisfied, Rachel. This vendetta has ruined relationships that may never heal." Lila, who had remained impressively composed throughout, stood and looked him in the eye. "Grandpa," she said quietly, "with respect, you damaged those relationships when you decided Mom and I didn't matter. We're not destroying anything. We're just making sure you face the consequences." And with that, we walked out, finally free. The simplicity and truth of Lila's words lingered in the room long after we walked out, leaving my parents behind to confront the wreckage of their schemes. What they had tried to control had slipped from their hands, and what they had underestimated had turned out to be our greatest strength. The months that followed brought steady, meaningful change. With my inheritance finally secured, I purchased a modest but warm 3-bedroom house on the east side of Sheboygan. It had a small garden, a wide front porch, and most importantly, space for peace. For the first time in years, we had a home that felt truly ours. I transitioned from part-time work at the art gallery into full-time management. Creative decisions, staffing, curation, it was all mine to oversee. The financial stability and freedom ignited something in me I had nearly forgotten I possessed. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building something. Lila blossomed too. Free from the strain of shielding me from truths I hadn't been ready to face, she leaned into her new relationship with Aunt Samantha and cousins she had only recently met. She visited Colorado twice that year, laughing freely and asking questions that once would have made her nervous. Owen settled into our new rhythm, slowly but steadily. Without the looming threat of custody battles or whispered comparisons, he relaxed. His visits with Gordon and Evelyn were structured and supervised at first, gradually lengthening as boundaries were respected. My father tested the waters now and then. Extravagant gifts, veiled suggestions, but firm consequences held. Mark surprised me most of all. Without the expectation of being my father's protege, he began showing up in smaller, more authentic ways. He made an effort with Lila, apologized for past dismissiveness, and started parenting Owen on his own terms. It didn't erase the past, but it mattered. Exactly 1 year after that infamous anniversary party, Lila and I sat side by side on our front porch, sipping iced tea and watching the sunset over the neighbors' rooftops. "Do you think Grandpa and Grandma will ever really change?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. People rarely change at the core, especially not at their age, but they can learn to behave differently when they realize the consequences are real. She nodded. "I still don't get why they did it. They already had more money than they could ever spend. Why try to take yours?" "It was never about the money," I said. "It was about control, about punishing me for not living the life they wanted, divorcing Mark, running the gallery, raising you to be strong." She smiled faintly. "I'm glad we fought back." "We wouldn't have won without you," I said softly, reaching for her hand. "Your instincts, your bravery, you saved us." She blushed. "I just paid attention." And that's exactly what they didn't expect. I squeezed her hand. "The biggest lesson? Trust your gut. When something feels off, it probably is." As twilight wrapped around us, I thought about the years I had measured my worth through Gordon's approval or Mark's praise. That was gone now. What remained was my own voice, and 2 children whose strength mirrored my own. "The most important thing you've learned?" I asked. Lila didn't hesitate. "That family isn't who you share blood with. It's who stands by you and tells you the truth, even when it hurts." She was right. She always had been. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever had to stand up to people who were supposed to protect you, please take a moment to comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your encouragement, or your own experiences. Your support means more than you know. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next. Here's what I've learned. Trust your instincts even when others try to silence them. Speak up, even when your voice shakes. And remember, family isn't who claims you, it's who shows up for you when it matters most.